Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to Crimes with Cole. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are all having an amazing day. So today, I wanted to talk to you about a case that I don't know if it would have ever been solved had the accomplice themselves had never came forward. This is the case of Sherry Lee Gibson that was only solved because the accomplice to the murder came forward 26 years later. 2.5 decades later, we finally found out who killed Sherry Lee Gibson. On March 1st of 1975, Sherry Lee Gibson was 23 years old, and she was dating Lindy Alton, who's 24. The two of them decided that they were going to go out to hang out with some friends. It wasn't until a little while after they had gotten there that they decided that they wanted some alone time. They wanted some Sherry Lindy time. So the two lovebirds decided to take a drive down what the locals had called Lover's Lane. Now, Lover's Lane was just this back road that not many people went down. You know, not a bunch of street lights, not a bunch of attention was drawn to Lover's Lane. It's where you could go to hang out with your lover and not be interrupted, or so at least Sherry and Lindy had thought. So the two proceeded down Lover's Lane. They had found a little area to pull off onto the side, and so they did. It wasn't until the very next morning when a farmer was coming down the lane that he noticed what seemed to be an abandoned car sitting off to the side of the road. So the farmer had stopped his truck. He got out and he walked over to the car. He started peeking in the windows to see maybe somebody was in there, maybe they had pulled over, needed to rest, maybe it was some crazy wild young kids that were drinking and shouldn't have been driving, so they didn't and they pulled over. He didn't know what to expect, but he wanted to go see in case that person had needed help. When the farmer had gone over to Lindy's car, he approached, he's peeking in the window, and he hears a pounding sound on the trunk. He runs back to his truck and grabs a crowbar, comes back to the trunk of Lindy's car, pries it open to find Lindy in there, panicking. Lindy jumps out, he panics, and he says, "Where's Sherry? Where's Sherry?" Lindy is frantic right now. He doesn't know where Sherry is. He doesn't remember too much of what happened. He just knows that somebody came, shoved him in the trunk of his car, and took Sherry. He doesn't know who, he doesn't know why, and he doesn't know where they were going. The police were rung, and when the police had arrived at Lindy's car, they were asking, what were you two doing out here? Who was it exactly that came up and took Sherry? How did you end up in the trunk of your car? Tell us everything that you know. He started telling them that he and Sherry just wanted to go up the street. They wanted to have some alone time. So they had pulled off to the side of the road that somebody came up from behind them. A man and a woman came up from behind Lindy and Sherry. They had pistol whipped Lindy, dragging him to the trunk, shoving him in the trunk. As he laid there, panicking, trying to figure out how to get out of this trunk, all he could hear was Sherry in the background screaming as the man and the woman dragged her away. Now, the cops almost believed Lindy. However, Lindy started stuttering when he was telling his story, so the police started questioning whether or not he was being truthful. What the police did not know was that Lindy had suffered from a speech impediment, And when he became extremely stressed or nervous, it would show. It would come through in his words. But the police just thought that he was nervous. And so he started stuttering because he was making up lies. A few days after the attack was reported, there was an abandoned farmhouse 7 miles from where Lindy's car was. Here is where they had found Sherry Lee's body. And they had discovered that she was beaten, taped with an R, and stabbed over a dozen times. And her fate would come to an end with 3 deep stab wounds to the heart, ultimately resulting in her death. Now, the autopsy of Sherry Lee would show low sperm count, which would indicate that it was an older man. So this eliminated Lindy from being a suspect. Not to mention, he did pass a polygraph test. And Lindy gave so many details. All the details he could think of that he could remember, he gave to the police. He gave sketch artists such descriptive details about the 2 attackers. They had came up with 2 extremely distinctive sketches, but nothing ever came of it. Nobody ever came forward with any more details. No one gave any more hints, tips, nothing. Nothing ever became of this case and who the attackers were. It wasn't until 2 years later, on August 1977, that a tip had submerged from a juvenile guard at the correction facility. And the guard said that a 15-year-old boy by the name of John Jeffers, he knew a thing or two. So the police pulled John Jeffers into the room and started interrogating him. And they spent hours interrogating this boy until finally he confessed. And he said he did it. It was him and his best friend, Timmy. That the 2 of them, they planned it all out. So they were on the search for Timmy. In January of 1978, they had found Timmy. He was serving our country. He was deployed over in West Germany. So they extradited him back to Indiana. And back to Indiana he came. Now, John had admitted that he would testify against Timmy. He would testify against him as long as he got the minimal sentence. It wasn't until sentencing day that John was taken back by the fact that the minimal sentence was 30 years for this crime. But on October 1978, Timmy's trial began. And they brought John out to testify against Timmy like he said he would. And it was, to everybody's surprise, it shocked the entire courtroom when John told them that it was all just a lie. He had made up the entire thing to get back at Timmy because he still had some hard feelings against Timmy for getting his then girlfriend pregnant. They brought Lindy out and they had put Lindy on the stand in Timmy's trial. And Lindy said that is not the man who had attacked us that night. And he made it very clear that Timmy was not the man at all. They had apologized to Timmy and sent him back to West Germany. And they had sent Timmy back to jail where he would end up taking his own life 5 years later. Nothing became of who the attackers were. The years passed and no other tips came. No other suspects came. No other news came of who took Sherry Lee's life. But the town had always gossiped. They always whispered. They always thought that Lindy had something to do with it. that maybe, just maybe, Lindy was the one who did all those horrible things to Sherry. That maybe he was able to get from his car to that abandoned farmhouse and back to his car and lock himself in the trunk right before the farmer got there early that morning. Maybe he did all of this, and we've been looking in all the wrong directions. Lindy went off. He had gotten married, had a family, but the talk of the town always was right there on his shoulder. It always haunted him. It always crept up. And weirdly, he had burned to death in a brush fire in 1998. 3 years after Lindy's death, a woman came forward with some information about Sherry Lee's case. This woman had confessed. She confessed that she was the female attacker, and her name was Ella Mae Dick. At the time of Sherry Lee's death, Ella was 20 years old, and she was married to a man by the name of Wayne Gully, who was 34 years old at the time. She had later divorced Wayne, and it had just weighed on her heart and mind that she needed to confess this horrible crime. She needed to get it off of her chest, and she needed to come forward and let them know that she was the one who did it. She had later informed the police that when her and Wayne were married, that Wayne was not a great man. Although he was extremely intelligent, charismatic, and a military veteran, he had a sadist sexual desire. And the relationship was extremely manipulative and abusive. That Wayne had desires of BDSM and swingers clubs and robberies, but all of that didn't fulfill Wayne's desires. He wanted more. And the crime against Sherry is what Wayne needed to fulfill his deep, dark desire. Ella had told the police things about the crime that even they didn't know. That it wasn't until they truly looked back at their notes and they put two and two together and realized that she was right, that those details were never released. So she had to have known something. She also told the police that her participation was those 3 fatal stab wounds that Wayne told her to finish off Sherry Lee. And ironically, the sketch that the sketch artist had made based off Lindy's description had matched Wayne and Ella perfectly. Now in his 60s, Wayne had given them very bland responses to all of their questions, saying that maybe he had blacked out, maybe he had forgot. But he did admit that the sketches did look a lot like him and Ella. In 2002, the two were put on trial. While Ella was convicted of second-degree murder, she had received 15 years. And Wayne was found guilty of first-degree murder. And although he still claims his innocence, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. I think it's crazy to think that, what if Ella never came forward? I don't know. I don't know if I would do it. Oh, that's so bad. That is so bad. I shouldn't even say that. I'm glad that they found her attackers. I'm glad that her family, those that are still around, were brought full circle. That they know who did it. But to think that those two could have gotten away with it, how many others get away with it? We don't know, though, because they're getting away with it. Oh, goodness. And poor Lindy, the last thing that you hear is your girlfriend screaming in terror because somebody is abducting her. I just don't think that's a sound you would ever be able to get out of your head. I don't. But what do you guys think? Isn't that wild to confess 26 years later? 26 years. Knowing you're going to prison. You're going to be spending however many years in prison. But let me know what you guys think. And until next time, please remember to be safe. And I will see you then. Bye.